inside and outside the classroom. Okay, so I'll be talking about a partnership that we have with olaupoko, which is the watershed protection. It's an NGO, nonprofit, that is concerned with the Ko'olau watershed. We have an ongoing partnership with them for probably about 5 years now on various activities. And I'll talk specifically about the rain garden today. So when I'm thinking about this engagement to empowerment idea, this is how I characterize it in my mind. So I just kind of put this together, and I would love to have your feedback on this towards the end if we have time to discuss it or whatever. But this is just how I think about it in my mind, where I'm dealing with a whole host of students, and I teach both undergraduates and graduate students. And how do we need to engage these students? How do we need to empower them? So I'm talking about an entire spectrum here, from engagement to empowerment. And because, you know, some of those students, I mean, it's like kind of like doing a stakeholder analysis, right? Where you're trying to figure out who your stakeholders are. Are they going to be high orbit stakeholders where they're kind of interested in the problem but not really, but you still need to engage them? Or are they really low orbit stakeholders that are really close and very, very focused on the problem? And those are the people that are self-selected, right? So we have a whole host of students, at least the ones that I deal with, are along this range, along this spectrum. So my job, I think my job is being, well, okay, so those students who aren't necessarily self-selected to the sustainability programs, I need to engage them to the extent where they become better citizens, better informed citizens, right? So I'm going to try to raise their awareness. I'm going to try to increase their understanding of the problems that we're facing, and really give them some kind of critical thinking skills so that they can go about and really take their newfound information and use it to be better informed citizens. So I have a little bit of the middle ground here, where they're becoming maybe more engaged, more self-selective to engaging in sustainability. So I want to give them these tools and practical skills that they can go out and apply to different areas, right? And to try and give them hands-on experience so that they can apply that to larger issues. And then finally, we have a whole host of students who are down on this end, totally self-selected. And for those students, I would like to try to give them the skills to do strategizing, that's hard to say, to give them visioning skills, those types of things where they're bigger thinkers, and they're automatically bigger thinkers. So how do you take advantage of that? And also to encourage them to collaborate with the communities. So the Rain Garden project that I'm going to talk about is a teeny tiny little project, right? Teeny tiny, one-off, kind of whatever you say, oh yeah, that's great. But what I'm trying to do is use that as a nugget. That's a little seed. And how are we going to build on it? And by building on something that's small like that, how am I going to increase the competencies of my students? So here I just wanted to quickly define what competence is. And how much time do I have actually? Did we break it down to 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20 minutes. Okay. And I'm keeping track. Okay. You've got 17 minutes.
As long as you let me know. Okay. So the idea about building these competencies in our students. So competence, right, is a general idea. Everybody can kind of define that off the top of your head, right? That you have the skills, you have the abilities, you have the knowledge, and you can, successfully problem solve. But, so then this comes from a lot of work that Arnim Milk has done from the Arizona State University, yes? So he's further defining competencies as it relates to sustainability. And it's the same definition, as you can see, with the additional caveat put in, that it's with respect to real-world sustainability problems, challenges, and opportunities, okay? So this kind of goes without saying, and I think this is all runs below the surface for all the things that we do. But to actually formally define it, there's a lot of work that's being done on it recently. So along with this, Rick has come up with this really nice diagram that I like, that he's talking about sustainability competencies. And he's breaking it down into these 4 major groups here, and then an overlapping interpersonal one. So now if I was to say to you, well, I have this rain garden project, and it checks all these blocks, it fits into all these different bubbles here, I can't really safely say that. But I could say that the rain garden project that I'm going to tell you about can check off maybe multiple circles here, right? So I think the idea is where I'm saying that the rain garden is this little seed for which a larger program can be built, that when you go to build larger programs, these are the types of things that you have to keep in mind. Okay, so just really quickly, systems thinking competencies kind of goes without saying, right? Pretty well defined. Thinking about systems, feedback loops, everything that we talked about, resilience in terms of sustainability, okay? Anticipatory competency, these are things where you're looking at uncertainty, right? Because we know that ecosystems are, we're worried about resilience, but how do we incorporate uncertainty into those things? So that's the kind of skills they would need to be able to think about uncertainty. Normative competencies, these are putting values and judgments, thinking about justice, social justice, and those ideas into it. Strategic competency is where you're looking at how do you vision, how do you strategize, how do you reach goals, those types of things. And then overlaying on top is the interpersonal competency, which of course is the collaboration aspect, right? Working with the community, working with your peers, working interdisciplinarily. So it's all those different types of things where you're taking all the competencies, put them together, and work with others. So how do we engage our students? So I say we engage our students inside and outside of the classroom, right? So this is my picture of outside the classroom. I didn't have a picture of inside the classroom, but they're pretty generic looking, so I figured we would just go with the outside part, right? So this is my natural resource management class. It's an undergraduate class. We talk about, obviously, managing natural resources, but from the point of view where we're looking at it strategically. How do you do a strategic plan? How do you do community-based natural resource management? All these different types of things. So the first unit that I taught this semester was about urban ecosystems. The first unit was on urban ecosystems. How do you manage the natural resources that are in our urban ecosystems? Because a lot of people don't really even equate the two. Natural resources and urban areas. A lot of people just don't even think about that. There are two together. So when we start on the inside of the classroom, we start first with the inside of the classroom, and I introduce them to the concepts of urban metabolism. So that we have throughput, right? We have all of our inputs, we have all of our outputs. Throughput's going to the system. What are the, how does the energy flow through the system? How do we incorporate the human aspects of the system along with the structure of the system with other natural resources, all those types of things, right? So I just like this, this pretty much says it all, huh? I had another one that was even more complicated, but then you would spend the whole entire 20 minutes just trying to figure out what it said. But I thought this one was pretty straightforward, okay? So we're talking about materials flow, that cities have metabolisms just like our bodies do, just like natural systems do, right? So from there, I asked them to do case studies about different aspects of managing urban ecosystems. And in particular, I also have them look into the concepts of low impact development. So that if we're going to be in an urban ecosystem, how is it that we can try to mimic natural systems? How is it that we can get a win-win situation between humans and the ecosystem there? And this is specifically focused on water resource management, low impact development within a city. So as you can see of these little rectangles here, that a lot of this kind of reverberates from the original competencies that I showed you, right? So urban metabolism, talking about systems, that's one of the competencies. This kind of reflects on the other. Mimics natural hydrology and processes. Customized site design, where you're working locally, right? Maintenance, pollution prevention, and education. These are tools that you can deal with uncertainty, doing life cycle analysis, that type of stuff. Directing runoff to natural areas, conservation. So all of these ideas, these are the key principles of low impact development. And once I impart that to them, then they can go and run with it, right? So that was the first part inside the classroom, at least my portion of giving them some background information on the urban ecosystems. So then I have my community partner come in, who's Todd Cullison. He's the executive director of the Hui Oko Olaupoko, and he's great. He's fabulous. He's a great person to work with. He comes in to the classroom and he lectures to the students, not even just lecture, but he has discussions with the students about low impact development and what they do in the Ko'olau. They're doing tons of projects. We've been working with them for years doing stream monitoring, water quality monitoring, look at erosion control up in the Heia, which is up in the Kaneohe area. But they work through Kaneohe, Kailua, Wanganalo, and currently they're doing this project where they've been funded through EPA, through the Department of Health, to build rain gardens throughout the residential areas on the windward side within the watershed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what a rain garden is. But the point is that great opportunity, right? He comes in and he talks to the students, discusses with the students about what is a rain garden. So these slides that I'm going to show you are the things, the information that he gives to our students. So he's talking about why build a rain garden. It's low impact development. We all know that once you're coming from a natural system to, all of a sudden you start paving everything, all these impervious surfaces are here. What's going to happen to all the water that comes down when it rains? Of course it's going to run off. So we're dealing with stormwater runoff. So, and you can see how for each element, as each time that we're building up more and more development into urban areas, where we're going from natural ground cover to 10 to 20% to 75 to 100% impervious surface. And here we have 5% deep infiltration, 10% shallow infiltration, 55% runoff. And we all know that to try and manage that natural resource, it becomes more difficult when it's just running away. We know that there's problems that are associated with that runoff. Not only are we losing the water, but it can contain nutrients, phosphorus, from fertilizers, from oils from the cars, from the parking lots. We know all these different types of things. We're losing the ability to recharge our groundwater, and of course, aesthetically, that too. So when we build a rain garden, I'm going to go through the anatomy of it. So you see there's a slight depression here, and the idea is that you collect the rainwater. You collect the rainwater, you hold it there, and you let it infiltrate naturally. Okay, so we have our inlet that comes in, and these pictures are not from the rain garden at HPU, but from at HPU State Park, where they've built a rain garden already. So we have the inlet, we have berms that we build up onto the sides. We have the slope that comes in, we have our level ponding area, and within the level ponding area, then we plant native plants. And then we have our outlet on the end there in case there's overflow and high rain events. And so this is a picture that kind of says it all, I think, in terms of stormwater management. It's with the engineering firm that Todd has worked with previously to try and come up with the rain gardens, with the rain garden information. So when you talk about pre-development, so here we have runoff over a time period during a rain event. But when you start to incorporate where there's development, post-development without controls at all, you can see big difference, right? So this is the big difference in terms of the volume that's lost for runoff. So then, of course, if we put in post-development with controls, such as low-impact development, then we can kind of spread it out. So we're not losing as much water, and actually the volume, it takes a longer time for the runoff to actually happen. So, all right, so that's background on like why do you do a rain garden? It's easy, it makes sense, right? So how do you calculate a rain garden size? So size, of course, is going to be a function of your contributing drainage area. So that could be a roof, it could be a parking lot, it could be sidewalks, it could be anything that's impervious surfaces. So for our case at HPU, we've picked an area along the side of our building, which is called our nursing annex, and I'll show a picture of it in a second. Todd has this great calculator. I think it's on the iPad, and you put in, it's updated for Hawaii now. It takes average rainfall for different areas in Hawaii, the calculations that are done so that you can be pretty certain that 90% of all storms are going to be able to work within this whatever rain garden size that you're going to figure out. The soil infiltration rate, that's case by case, right? So you go out there, you dig a hole, right? You dig a hole that's about 12 inches deep, you fill it up with water, you let it drain out. You come back, you fill up the hole, let it drain out. You come back, third time's a charm, right? You go back, and that's when you measure it over each couple of hours to figure out how fast that the water is infiltrating through that particular type of soil. Ours at HPU was 1 inch per hour that we kind of figured out. And then you figure out a ponding depth. And all these things are just, it's done for you. This is great. So they're putting this all into a community accessible manual. They've already done it. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So the Kukui Cup has done this, yeah? So it's here. So if you figure out, what your contributing drainage area is, then you can figure out if your infiltration rate is 1 inch per hour. You can look at the sizing factor, right? So of course, if you have, oh my gosh, okay, good. Here's your rain garden size. You can tell I'm an engineer by training, right? Oh yeah, let's talk about the detail. Okay, so this is from a Google shot of the nursing annex. This is the layout here. We started on that one morning. So we did this all in one day. We had about 20 students that came out. This was the area that had been scoped out. So you can see that our drainage area is coming off the roof, We're going to try and capture it here. Here's the outlet. We're going to build an outlet here so you can just picture where the area was before. That's the before. This is where we're building the inlet, which was the hardest work because we had to make it deep enough so that we could bury the piping that was attached to the downspout. This was the area that we had planned out based on all those calculations. It was 160 square feet that we needed. You can see we measured the slope here. Here are the students again, once again, digging away. And then you can see, oh, here's Lamberto. So you can see here that he has this out here. He's trying to, they would dig for a little bit, and then they would, make sure that the slope was correct so that you would actually have some ponding take place. Here you can see our lovely view of the ko'olaus back there. This is a residence dorm right here. This is on the Hawaii Loa campus. Obviously, it's not the downtown campus. So we're almost done there. Constructing the overflow to make sure that if it's, if we have a really high rain event, that it will we'll go over the overflow without actually causing more erosion. We planted native vegetation here, so we have ferns. We have, and all the native vegetation was determined based on whether it was up on top of the berm, so that they're dry-loving species, inside the basin, wet-loving species. Yeah.
Is there a natural incline there? I can't really tell from the.
So there is a little bit of a natural slope because the campus is naturally sloped that way anyway. Yeah, so you need to have a 2% slope up above the inlet to make sure that you're capturing the water, and then you make the basin level so that it'll stay and infiltrate. So yeah, so we had to dig a little deeper on one end than the other. So here's maintaining the rain garden. So after that, we put mulch in. We had the students. Here it is when it's full. Like this was the test where we could actually see that it was full. To make sure, so we have a little taro in the middle there. We got ferns. Here's the wet-loving plants here. And then the students took the responsibility of watering the garden on a regular basis for 3 weeks until the plants really established themselves. So this is 3 weeks later. This was a picture that was in the Hawaii Star Advertiser. They came in and wrote a little bit about it, which is great. So this is our happy students. It was 160 square feet. We had 60 volunteer hours, but I like how we put this up here. We qualify it. Not everybody works so hard. I didn't really do much. I just made sure everybody had sunscreen on and was well hydrated. So I didn't really get very much money. $367, right? Courtesy of the US EPA via the Department of Health. Free, right? So we had free. So let's just real quickly, I have just couple more slides to finish up. So what lessons have we learned? Remember, this is an itty-bitty little project, right? It strengthened our community partnership, right? So now HPU HOK is going to go out and they have money to build 50 rain gardens at different households. They're looking for volunteers. If you live on the windward side, yeah, I'll give you the information. Yeah, definitely. So they have money to subsidize 50 rain gardens as this pilot project, right? Gave students a sense of ownership. They loved it. They went out there, they watered everybody, everybody took a turn, they went out and watered, they were all like passing the key around to get into the gate to get the hose out, to everybody water the whole thing. They came back in like, only one plant died. We only had one plant die the whole time, it was great. So they really, it was like a whole sense of responsibility, of fellowship. It was an easy thing, and they just loved it. They loved getting outside. It overlapped with other activities and classes. So I do a grant writing component in this class, right? So the grant writing part, they're going to use rain gardens as how they can, I give them a mock RFP, and this is one thing that they can use to as a proposal. Other activities, we in our environmental policy class, we follow policies that are at the legislature. This active this session, there's one on gray water, so now they're really interested in that, following that one. Great communication tool. We were in Honolulu Star Advertiser. We have a YouTube video that's up. The Kalamalama, the school newspaper, had done an article about it. Great big picture. So it was just really, it was nice how everything kind of came together. A communication tool to, the real purpose is the win-win for HOK is that now they have a public space that has a rain garden that there are people here saying, like, hey, go check it out. Okay, thanks. Of course, constrained by time. The fact that the preparation time for the project, it was timing that we had to get the rain garden in by a certain time so it could be working on HOK's schedule. Class allotted time, we only have an hour and a half each class session. It was really hard. The students, luckily they were able to collaborate with some of their other professors so they could come out for the day, for at least part of the afternoon. And really, I would love to have the students pick their own, this is an example of the signage. But I would love to be able to do it, next time around, how like every semester you teach a class, they're like, oh, next time I'm gonna do it better, right? So this is how I would like to see classes, not just this class, but all classes look like in 2020, right? Transdisciplinary classes, yeah, I love that word. I was so glad that Lee Sharp had said that last night in her slides, she used that word. It's not just interdisciplinary, it's transdisciplinary, all right? We're all in it for the same reason. Have a service learning component in there, so have even more community partnerships. This is HOK is just one. Experiential learning and project-based, of course. It's easy to say that. It's harder to do it. It's more difficult to do it. I'd love to have them be able to do something from start to finish. Here it was kind of like it was already like a pre-made project for them to just come out and learn about and do it. If I did it again, I would have them do it from start to finish. In fact, what I'd really like to do is have the whole course be structured so that from the beginning of the semester that they go out and find projects. They go out and determine the projects and make the community partnerships and do like a grant writing phase. And that by the time, that one of them wins. And whoever wins, that's the project you get to build at the end of the semester. So that's what I'd really like to do. And again, more critical thinking and problem solving. Everybody can use that, right? Even, no matter how old you are, you can always sharpen those skills. So that's what I would like student engagement to look like in 2020. Maybe that would bring it out to the empowerment side. Okay? So with that, I think I just had, this is our team. This is our team right here, Mahalo. And I can give you the information for the, to get one of these. You can download it for free from the website. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for just one question. Someone has one quick one?
Is there an attempt to gain industry partners too, or just community partners?
Sure, that would be great though, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean at this point it's just, we have a good working relationship with this group, and yeah, we would love to have industry partners.
Because I don't see that, to gain widespread awareness and implementation.
Yeah, like replication.
For sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. And again, so it's EPA funding that comes through the Department of Health. So there is some funding there to try and replicate it that way. But you're right to have, so now they've also done, do you know where Buzz is in Kailua, like right there? So he's done some work as well. HOK has done the work with that parking lot right there, trying to put in a lot of low impact design and stormwater management there. And so Buzz's has been a partner in that and things like that. So I think that's really what it is. You go to the community and you find not just the NGOs and the nonprofits, but you do find local businesses. So that's a great suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Great,
Okay, the second speaker is me.
No.
So I'm Philip Johnson. I'm a professor of computer science at Manoa, and I want to talk with you about a project called the Kukui Cup, which we've been doing for a few years. We have 3 Kukui Cup folks over here who can talk to you as well. We're all wearing our t-shirts today. We want to engage students in energy issues, and so I want to show you some examples. The Kukui Cup is a game, so I'm going to give you some game-like examples of how we do engagement. So here's one example, a riddle, okay? Who am I? I'm a small, who is this is the question. I'm a small island archipelago with a small isolated electrical grid, importing oil and coal for 80% of my energy. Anything coming to mind? An economic outflow equal to 10% of my gross domestic product, despite significant local renewable resources available. So who do you think that is? Any guesses? No, I'm serious. Come on.
Hawaii.
Hawaii. Wrong.
Marshall Islands.
Marshall Islands.
What island is this?
Iceland.
This is Iceland.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I'm very competitive in games.
But the answer to the riddle is not Iceland, but Iceland in 1965. Okay? So Iceland today has 100% clean energy, electricity and heating. It uses fossil fuels only for transportation and fishing. And it plans to go all electric vehicles within 10 years. Okay, and they also are competing, I think, with Norway and a couple other countries to be the first carbon neutral nation on Earth. Okay? So I bring this up because Hawaii in 2013 looks a whole lot like Iceland did in 1965. Okay? And I say this not to be like, we suck, but more to say, look, it's possible. You know, you look at our current state and you just feel, oh, this is crazy. How do we ever dig ourselves out of this hole? Well, it's actually possible to do it, and here's an example of a place that has done it. Okay, so what I want to do now is show you a little 3-minute video, hopefully, that is what UH Manoa students know about energy actually before the Kukui Cup. Oh, doggone it.
Where does Hawaii's energy come from?
I think a lot of it is wind. Well, let's see. We have solar power.
Wind turbines in North Shore.
The wind, the waves,
Like,
the sun,
Yeah.
solar energy, the sun.
not all of it. What is a vampire load?
I have to say I do not know what a vampire load is.
When the energy drops to zero.
Vampire load? I have no idea what a vampire load is. Is it something to do with laundry? I don't know.
I don't know, when you don't come out of your room because you have no energy, you hide in the dark.
Okay, so obviously it's kind of funny, you know, but it also reveals the fact that the utilities have done a great job of enabling us to be completely ignorant about energy. Okay, so there's a wall outlet over there. As a computer scientist, I view that as the user interface to electricity. Okay, and you plug something in there and you expect there will be as much electricity or as much energy as you need that's going to be instantly available. It's going to be high quality. It's not going to blow up my computer. And it's going to be cheap because there's no meter involved. In fact, anybody can just go to, you know, plug in there and the university is going to absorb the cost of that. And the reason being is that electricity seems to be so cheap that we don't need to attach a little card to it or something. All right? So what we're trying to do in the Kukui Cup is say we need to become more sophisticated about energy in order to take action and in order to change our behavior. We're not growing up with knowledge of that information. We're not required to take classes. The idea is to create a game that students can play that's fun and engaging and then gets across these issues. Okay, that's called a serious game because it's a game that deals with a real world issue. It's also referred to as an augmented reality game because it involves the game, actions in the real world affect the state of the game, and then by playing the game, it affects the state of your actions in the real world. Okay, so that's some of the stuff we have. Okay, so this is the logo. In fact, Alex here in the front row was our graphic designer. He did the t-shirts, he's done all the images for it, so we're kind of bummed out that he's graduating. But hopefully he'll continue to volunteer. We've done 4 Kukui Cups so far. We did one last year and this year at UH. We've also done one last year at Hawaii Pacific University, as well as one at the East-West Center. And I talked with Josh Prigge. He wants to do another one in the fall at HPU. We'll be doing another one at UH. And if you're from another UH system school and are interested in it, let me know because we would love to facilitate that. So here's an example of some of the screenshots from the game. We have a page where we provide real-time access to the power that you consume. We also have a game called the Daily Energy Goal game, which rewards teams, which in most cases are floors in a residence hall, with points for actually decreasing their energy consumption below a historical baseline that we've calculated. We can provide them with access to their real-time power consumption. This is updated about every 10 seconds. The goal here is so that you could actually run around and turn off all the lights on your floor and unplug your refrigerators and so forth and see actually what the impact of that is on your energy consumption so that you can actually experiment with your behavior and see a measurable impact. What's interesting about this is that when we went out to bid to get the meters to install in the dorms, we said, well, we need internet access to these meters and we need to be able to pull the meter every 10 seconds in order to get the current power consumption. And the salesman or engineer from the vendors about the idea of providing this kind of information. So that's an obstacle that people confront. We have a page called the Get Nuts page, which involves educational activities. So we have this kind of Jeopardy-like interface where you can click on a cell, you can read a certain, or engage in a certain activity. It could be watching a YouTube video or attending a workshop or going on an excursion. You can get points for doing that. This is the Smart Grid game. And then we have a variety of scoreboards so that you can see where you rank relative to other people and other teams. For incentives, we have a couple of different kinds of incentives. Here we go. One incentive is to award prizes to the top players of the game. Okay, now there's 1,000 people in the Hawaii Loa residence halls. About a third of them, 350 of them, played the game. So, there's a couple people that actually have a hope of winning the iPad, right? But the problem is, what about those other 340 students who aren't going to be first place? How do we incentivize them? And so we have this other thing called a raffle game, where for each 25 points that you achieve in the game, you get this raffle ticket, and then you can bid on a whole selection of different prizes. And you can see what the odds are that you'll win the prize at any point in time, because the system will display how many tickets have been allocated to that prize, how many tickets you've allocated to that prize, and then do the division. So you can see right now, I have a 5.3% chance of winning the Smart Strip. Okay? Now what makes this cool is that at any point in time, you can go in and take your ticket out of a given category and put it someplace else. And everybody else can do that too. So there's this kind of eBay auction-like atmosphere of people moving their tickets around to try to optimize their chances. The goal of this combination of education, real-time feedback, and these games is to make a virtuous circle, so that people go into the game, they learn things about energy and learn things about the way their behaviors can affect their consumption. They go out into the real world, implement those changes, and then they go back into the game to see what impact it's had on their standards. Okay. So what did we find out? We've done studies. This is from the 2012 Kukui Cup. We did a survey of students and asked them about their energy knowledge before the game happened. And we gave those same students the same survey afterwards. Okay? Remarkably enough, there were about 48 students who completed this survey before. They were randomly selected. After we found out who actually played the game, 24 of them played the game, 24 didn't. Okay, just completely, like, we got the best possible outcome. We got two exactly equal groups, completely by chance. And actually we found there was a significant difference. Okay, so the students who played the game knew more facts about energy at the end of the game. The students who didn't play the game didn't really change. Okay, which is kind of what you'd expect and hope for. So it does turn out that this kind of intervention does appear to increase people's factual knowledge about energy issues. Here's a chart that shows energy consumption, and you can see, this is actually from the HPU students, you can see that their consumption decreased by about 20% during the course of the game. You can see after the game, it went back up. Okay. So we're still struggling with what does it mean to have a sustainable change in energy consumption, and how do we do that with this kind of challenge?
But back up, but not quite at the pre-game level.
Right. So this is known. This is a very famous. This is the Rebound Effect. Yeah. It has a name, and it doesn't go quite back to the same spot that, maybe a few weeks later it was. I'm not going to make any claims. Okay, so here's a really interesting result that I thought was a flaw in our experimental design until one of my students' PhD defenses, when I suddenly realized this was a feature, not a bug. Okay. Here's students' reports on their self-reported energy behaviors before the competition, which is right here. And then afterwards, you can see both of these things go up a little bit, okay? Indicating that both those who played the game and those who didn't play the game increased in their self-reported energy behaviors. Both groups are seeming to change their behaviors. And so in the literature, you always want to isolate your control group from your treatment group. And so we're thinking, oh damn, you know, you got the person playing, and it's the roommate, and we couldn't really separate those two things. And I'm literally in the defense looking at that for the 14th time, and thought, this is awesome. It means you don't need people to play the game to be influenced by the game, which is kind of like duh, you know. So, and then Michelle over here was doing qualitative interviews with students, and she had an interview with one student. Asked the student, well, what do you know about the Kukui Cup? The student gives Michelle a blank stare. I don't know what the Kukui Cup is. Okay, and then the interview goes on, and then Michelle then starts asking her, the student, about energy behaviors, and the student starts talking about energy behavior changes that were talked about in the cup. Okay, now so it's, you know, it's weak. I mean, maybe the person learned about it someplace else, but we have multiple kinds of evidence starting to appear that talks about this diffusion effect. Okay, so moving forward, one of the ways we want to change this research is to think less in terms of we need 100% of the people to play the game, which after all is impossible. Not everybody likes to play games, and we will never get 100% playing. But we could strive for 100% diffusion. Okay, and so you know that's radically changed the way I think about what is the impact of this intervention. There's going to be a certain impact on the people who directly play. There's a certain impact on the people who are influenced by those who play. And how do we maximize that with respect to the game mechanics and the structure of the challenge? Prizes are something that really help people. The first Kukui Cup, we got Jack Johnson to autograph the guitar. This is a guitar I bought off of Craigslist, so it was recycled. So he autographed it, and the logo for the Kukui Cup is Lights Off, Game On, so he put that there. And we actually took a photo of him holding it so that we could prove to the students that when they received this guitar, it wasn't just me. Okay, so anyway, what we learned is engagement is actually really hard. You know, we sent out emails to every student. We had posters in the lobbies. The RAs were engaged, all this stuff. Despite that fact, many students would come out and say, I have no clue what this is. One of the things we discovered this past year is we did it right in the beginning of September, which turns out to be the first few weeks that a student is not living at home, not in high school, able to stay up as late as they want without a parent telling them, able to eat whatever they want in a cafeteria. You know, it's like overwhelming novelty, and the Kukui Cup is just like, you know, one more kind of thing. So probably not the best time to do it. As I said before, diffusion is this very interesting issue. Diffusion did not occur with respect to the factual knowledge. So if we asked the student, what is a kilowatt hour? Then the student who didn't play the game might not know the answer to that. But with respect to behaviors, turning off lights, or you know, taking the stairs, or taking shorter showers, whatever, all that stuff actually can be apparently diffused through the intervention. And then finally, for 2020, what I'd like to see happen is diffusion of the Kukui Cup experience in general. We've kind of created a framework whereby it can be tailored to different organizations and different circumstances. One of the things that we discovered through this, or we believe from this experience, is that these experiences have to be very contextual. So when we were going out looking for content about energy, the first thing we realized is we couldn't use anything from YouTube. Because if you go to YouTube and you see a little clip about energy, they're going to say the primary source of energy consumption in the typical American household is the heating system. Okay, so right away you just throw out everything you ever read on YouTube because it's based upon this mainland sense of where energy consumption is. So we had to build all our own content. And we now believe that that's just a general feature, is when you do these things, you try to make them really localized to your particular circumstances. We'd like to expand to other resources. And then finally, we'd like to get away from people like, old people like me, trying to tell young people like them, how you should think about energy. We'd like to see this as something that students do at their freshman year, and then they manage and they run the game as they get to be upperclassmen. Okay, so thank you very much. And we have time for one question.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did the Kukui Cup get started? Did you initiate that, or?
I did.
Wonderful.
I did.
That's great. I'm at HPU and we're involved in playing with.
His name is Phil Kukui.
I mean, I guess, you know, the quick story about it is I have a student, Robert Brewer, who was interested in doing a thesis on a sustainability issue, and my research area at that time was software metrics. I'm a software engineering, and I'm a software engineer as, you know, my professional area within computer science. And so on a lark, I wrote a grant to the National Science Foundation, which was, I've submitted probably 20 grants over the 20 years, and this was by far the worst grant I'd ever submitted. I had no publications in the area. I had no previous experience in sustainability, user interfaces, any of this stuff, okay? But I thought, I'm going to submit this proposal because there's a deadline, and it will force me to think about what what this research should look like. What's the arc over the next 3 years? You know, so I just did it, and it was actually very relaxing because I thought, I'm never going to get this damn, you know, I mean, I would never give me this money. So we submitted, and in NSF they have this one thing called broader impacts. That's a very important part of evaluating a proposal, and the broader impact of my software metrics research was, you know, a few thousand people and, you know, certain kinds of systems. Well, the broader impact of getting people to change their energy behaviors is billions of people, trillions of dollars. So, you know, I completely scored on the broader impact part of it. Plus, it turned out, as far as I can tell, nobody else had a track record in this area either. And I was just kind of surfed the wave of this new area. I put together the right things, and so they gave me $400,000 to do this. So we got that, and it was like, okay, well, we're off to the races. So now the grant's kind of coming to an end this year, and we're looking for how do we make it more sustainable from a financial perspective. But there's a lot of good opportunities there.
Thank you. Very nice story.
Okay, so our third and the grand finale of this session is
I'm actually the unintended child.
Tim Botkin, and you can bring up your thing. So he is an instructor in the Sustainability Sciences Management program at UH Maui College. Prior to teaching, he practiced environmental and land use law 16 years and was county land use administrative judge. As county commissioner, he focused on smart growth, comprehensive water management, transit-oriented development, and youth asset building. Tim holds a JD from the University of Oklahoma and a master's in sustainability management from James Madison University and the University of Malta. Tim will describe curriculum approaches in use at Maui College to treat sustainability as a holistic, ongoing process using facts and problem-driven analysis and the tools which allow students to do so.
Oh, there's a mouthful. How many of you knew that there was actually a bachelor's level program in sustainability in the UH system? You know, very few actually, I think, do know. And at Maui, it's only a couple of years old. And so what I want to talk about is our experience there and what we've had. Now, I forgot to put a name, so this is just part 3, I guess. But at any rate, one of the things we talked about doing is why do students engage in the conversation? So there's a couple of reasons I wanted to go up. I mean, these guys have done some of the really good engagement part because it perks the interest. But then now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more classroom stuff that maybe isn't quite as much fun, but it's real, I think. And so we know all around us, and when I teach intro sustainability, we talk about these big things that are happening. You read about it every day. It's why probably our Congress is paralyzed, because every week we've got a new worldwide disaster going on. So when we talk about water and climate, I like to call it chaos as opposed to change because it is completely uncertain. Energy, wealth disparity, transparency, all these different things. That's one piece of it, these topics that keep popping up that we're dealing with. And then another piece of it is, it's not just the topics themselves, but the increasingly rapidity of the change, the apparent complexity. The world seems to smear around and circles and faster and faster all the time. How do we deal with that? And I think that's a piece that causes us to pause. Now, there's been a lot of reference to the Brundtland report at the summit, which is kind of the penultimate definition of sustainability, and I think that's the right term, definition. And that is that we take care of our current needs without destroying the needs and opportunities of the future. I like to juxtapose that against this, which is, I don't know if many of you have seen this little video called Did You Know? I was just talking to you about that earlier, but it's an interesting compilation of what's going on in the world, and Carl Frisch has changed a lot. And this is a paraphrase, but basically says that the information we get now, that you get in classrooms as your student, 4 years from now will basically be irrelevant because change is occurring. So how in the world do we teach people anything in this context is one question to ask. Now, obviously there are enduring pieces, enduring components that we can and will stick with, but it's a dynamic that is out there all the time. And so when we talk about it, and this term empower, teach, help, assist, poke, whatever you want to call it, you know, sure, Brundtland's a great statement, but it's really a goal. We want to meet the future needs, you know, and ourselves at the same time. But how do we do that? There's nothing in the Brundtland statement that tells us how we're going to go about it. It's just that we should. And that is where a definition and a universally accepted premise about sustainability continues to get hung up all the time. Is what does it mean? How do we do it? How are we consistent about it? Very difficult piece. And in fact, sustainability programs focused solely on sustainability are quite rare, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So what we do know is there are things that come up that are outside the lines of some of the guides that we've established. Some things are relatively easy. We believe we can do things like rain gardens. They're a fantastic example of how some relatively complex thinking actually turns into a very simple project. It's an outstanding possibility, certainly in energy and some of the efficiencies we have there. But then we have paper or plastic, which we've resolved across the islands in many ways by banning paper bags. But some of you may remember the original paper plastic conversation was about diapers. And I'm not sure we've really done anything about that. I'm not sure anybody can even tell you which is better. Because we know we fill the landfills with plastic diapers, yet the amount of water and power that goes into washing cloth diapers is humongous as well. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to answer that question. The two light bulbs. We know with regard to efficiency which one wins. We're also worried about the mercury accumulation coming out of the compact fluorescent bulbs. So a different issue. It's not quite the same. There's a little nick in our shorts there. We can't quite be certain where we want to go sometimes without further analysis. And then on islands, in particular, the conversation about recycling. Generally, recycling is considered good in the waste hierarchy because what it means is by adding just a little resource, we can keep that material, that resource in the stream without throwing it away and having to go get a new one. So the top end is reduce, remember. Reuse without adding resource, recycle, add a little resource before we have to throw it away, right? Well, but look what we're doing with our resource in recycling. You know, it's baled and shipped to the mainland. So suddenly there's a lot of resource going into that, and so we have to rethink again. Does this universally apply, or do we need to look harder at something else? So these are the sustainability issues I think that we are dealt all the time, and they're going to continue. They are not going to go away. Some we have been able to resolve and work on and actually implement as practices. Others are continuing challenges, and that's something that we have to get our hands on if we're going to try to be successful with progress. And it will be just progress. It's not attainment. There's no such thing as being sustainable. It's being more sustainable. And hopefully we can be comfortable with that because that's the best we're going to do. So when we look at these things, we know sometimes the answers aren't clear. The issues are getting more complex. And the only certainty is that there's going to be more of them all the time. And so how do we do it? It could be very frustrating, very annoying, in fact, downright humbling and depressing if you're not careful. But I think there is some work going on out there in Arnhem Week, who I've talked to a little bit, who you talked about, is a great resource in this regard too. And this stems from some of his work. But how can we do it? So what I want to talk to you about is two ways in higher education that we can address sustainability issues, one of which is not as commonly used. So, and they sort of compete, sort of balance. I'm not sure this is the best diagram to demonstrate it, but one is we're passing on information that we know is valid and factual, scientific, what have you, the best information we've got. We pass that from one generation to the next. The other then is improving our thinking and learning skills, which is an area that we need to embellish in order to deal with these uncertain and new issues that we see all the time. So talk a little about both. Domain knowledge being the conventional classic form of education. It's critical to know and to have an understanding of how things work that we feel pretty comfortable about. Even those that are changing, sometimes we need to know how they work so that we can try to get them back. We see that with ecosystems, for example. It stems from this attempt to, and understanding that there was so much information going back as far as the 15th century that we needed to create categories of information for learning in particular. Now, of course, those categories persist not only in education, but in government and in business and everything we do. We categorize in order to be more comfortable with our organization. But we can't forget those categories are completely human created. Nobody came out of the woods as a mystery fairy and told us this is how it works. We did it because it was convenient. And we have to remember that. So we have prerequisites in our program, for example, that fit these categories. And you have to, because otherwise how do you explain things? In sustainability higher education, which first kind of came out of the woodwork in about 1970 with the Brundtland Report, where the UN came to the world and said, hey, we need to get a handle on this. And there were actually 3 pieces that were promoted at that point. One was environmental protection, one was public health, and one was wealth disparity. So a little different from the triple bottom line that we kind of bandy about these days. But the truth is, what happened when higher education got a hold of it is that it was a really difficult thing to try to figure out with the existing categories and existing methods. How can we teach all this stuff at the same time? Very difficult. So what we did is said, well, we're going to begin by increasing our environmental rates back in the 70s, early 70s, because there was none before that. And so environmental science programs proliferated, and there's tons of them out there. And at that point also, sustainability and environmental kind of became apparently synonymous. And we lost a little bit some of the other pillars that we talk about now more today than we used to. But most of the time, as we look at where sustainability higher education is these days, and I just checked the ASHE site again in reference to our earlier speaker about what programs are out there, most of them are sustainable something. You know, they're sustainable business, sustainable agricultural design, forestry planning, whatever they may be. In other words, taking a piece of this pie and saying, okay, how can we be sustainable in that area? Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the truth is, it doesn't necessarily help us understand a lot of the big pictures, because remembering, we don't get to decide where problems are going to go. We have to deal with problems rather than try to predetermine what they're going to do. Now, when we take that path, and that is chopping things up a little bit, reduction strategies often called, there are some things that happen that become a little bit of a problem in the way we're trying to address sustainability today. And one is, we have so many things that we think we need to know all about that the complexity seems to get even worse. How am I going to know all about business and agriculture and forestry and all these things at the same time? How can that be? It's going to boggle me. It's impossible. So the complexity seems overwhelming. It also then leads to expertise, which is how we create silos. It's not that they're always bad, but at the same time, our brains can only handle so much. And if we are truly an expert in one thing, it means we're probably further removed from other things because we haven't had the opportunity to be exposed to them. And so we lose some of the interconnection that we know is necessary in the real world. So, and we even go so far as to kind of assume the world is organized the way we think it is, without realizing that we really have no idea in many instances how it's going to happen, right? So usually, when we approach the problems by asking an expert, that's how we go about it. We find who's the best expert to handle this problem in the nature of it as we understand it. And that expert, whether that's me or you or whomever, is going to do the best job they can based upon their understanding, perspective, mental model, a lot of different terms for it, to go fix this problem. And that's what we do. We go fix problems. But the real problem is that sometimes we're not even aware of the other things that we don't fix, and sometimes we can exacerbate. So you see that, for instance, with congestion on roads. And we think, well, we'll just add more lanes. and fix the congestion problem. But in truth, history has shown us time and time again, you add another lane within 5 years, it's just as congested as the one that was there beforehand. So we don't fix, in fact, it exacerbates the problem. It's logical, but it doesn't necessarily work. And so there are all kinds of different things that kind of fall into that realm. But so the other side of it, though, is how can we look at things at the same time without necessarily needing to immerse ourselves there? And how can we connect the issues? And this, it kind of dinged home for me one time with a student after an introductory class where we studied, like I say, all these different issues, water and energy and climate and transportation, et cetera. And the student said, well, that was great. This was really cool. I liked learning about what's going on there. I liked learning about the problems and maybe some of the fixes, but how do they really